the U.S. and other countries to open a maritime corridor for aid from Cyprus to help ease the desperate conditions in northern Gaza. Today is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024, and this is the Dunkley Report. Some of Israel's closest allies, including the United States, have condemned the deaths of 7 aid workers who were killed by airstrikes in Gaza, a loss that prompted multiple charities to suspend food deliveries to Palestinians on the brink of starvation. The deaths of the World Central Kitchen workers threatened to set back efforts by the U.S. and other countries to open a maritime corridor for aid from Cyprus to help ease the desperate conditions in northern Gaza. President Joe Biden said the deaths were tragic, but that even worse, it was not a standalone incident, and said flatly that Israel was not doing enough to protect civilians. Iran has vowed to respond to a deadly airstrike widely attributed to Israel that demolished Iran's consulate building in the Syrian capital and killed 12 people, including 2 Iranian generals. The Lebanese militant Hezbollah group, a key ally of both Syria's government and Iran, also pledged punishment and revenge. Israel, which has repeatedly targeted Iranian officers on sites in Syria and in Lebanon, did not confirm the attack. Iran's state television reported on Tuesday that the country's Supreme National Security Council, a key decision-making body, met late the previous night and decided on an unrequired response to the strike. It said the meeting was chaired by President Ebrahim Raisi, but provided no further details. The strongest earthquake in a quarter century has rocked Taiwan during the morning rush hour. Wednesday's quake killed 9 people, stranded dozens of workers at quarries, and sent some residents scrambling out the windows of damaged buildings. The quake also injured more than 1,000. It was centered off the coast of rural, mountainous Hualien County, where some buildings leaned at severe angles, their ground floors crushed. Just over 150 kilometers away in the capital of Taipei, tiles fell from older buildings, and schools evacuated students to sports fields. The numbers of people missing, trapped, or stranded fluctuated as authorities learned of more in trouble and worked to locate or free them. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping have discussed Taiwan, artificial intelligence, and security issues in a call meant to demonstrate a return to regular leader-to-leader dialogue between the two powers. Tuesday's call was their first conversation since their November summit produced renewed ties between their militaries and a promise of enhanced cooperation on stemming the flow of fentanyl from China. The White House described the call as candid and constructive. Xi told Biden the two countries should adhere to the bottom line of no clash, no confrontations as one of the principles for this year. Biden views sustained interactions as key to keeping competition between the two massive economies and nuclear-armed powers from escalating to direct conflict. Donald Trump has again used language denounced by Democrats to hammer President Joe Biden over his handling of the U.S.-Mexico border as he campaigned in 2 Midwestern swing states likely to be critical to the outcome of the 2024 election. Trump on Tuesday was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Green Bay, Wisconsin, where he railed against what he labeled Biden's border bloodbath. He has been leaning into inflammatory rhetoric about the record surge of migrants at the southern border since he became his party's presumptive nominee. Trump said Biden has brought the carnage and chaos and killing from all over the world and dumped it straight into our backyards. The largest fresh egg producer in the U.S. says it has stopped production at a plant in the Texas Panhandle after bird flu was found in the flock. Officials later saw the same infection was found at a poultry facility in Michigan. Mississippi-based Cal-Maine Foods said Tuesday it destroyed 1.6 million laying hens and 377,000 pullets at the Texas facility on the Texas-New Mexico border. Cal-Maine says there is no known risk with eggs in the market and no eggs have been recalled. In Michigan, the State Department of Agriculture and Rural Development said the infection was found in a commercial poultry facility there. Houston's police chief is declining to say if recent revelations that more than 264,000 cases filed with Houston police in the past 8 years were dropped speak to broader problems within his agency. During a nearly 2-hour meeting Tuesday with reporters and local community leaders, Chief Troy Finner said his department has lost public trust. In February, Finner announced thousands of incident reports, including for sexual assault, were never submitted for investigation. Instead, officers assigned them an internal code that cited a lack of personnel available. Finner says there will be accountability, but asked residents to wait for an internal investigation to be finished by the end of April. A company that provides services for immigrants in federal detention has been ordered to pay more than $811 million in restitution and penalties in a lawsuit alleging it used deceptive and abusive tactics. A judgment filed Tuesday in federal court says Nexus Services must pay restitution to federal authorities and penalties to New York, Virginia, and Massachusetts. It must also pay more than $111 million in civil penalties. State and federal officials say the company promised to secure immigrants' release on bond, but concealed and misrepresented the true nature and costs of its services. The company said in a statement that it intends to appeal the judgment. Crews have opened a second temporary channel allowing limited marine traffic to bypass the wreckage of Baltimore's collapsed Francis Scott Key Bridge, which is blocking the vital port's main shipping channel. Authorities said Tuesday that work is also continuing to open a third channel that will allow larger vessels to pass through the bottleneck since the bridge collapsed 1 week ago. The channels are primarily for vessels helping with the cleanup effort. Meanwhile, Governor Wes Moore said at a news conference that rough weather conditions in recent days have made it unsafe for divers who are trying to recover the bodies of the 4 construction workers believed trapped underwater in the wreckage. Americans were in sports bars from coast to coast on Monday night, eyes glued to televisions and even movie screens. This wasn't Monday Night Football. This was Monday Night Women's Basketball. Caitlin Clark in Iowa topped Angel Reese in LSU. Paige Buchers in UConn topped Juju Watkins in USC. The rewards for Iowa and UConn were trips to this weekend's Final Four, but the biggest winner might have been the women's game, which seems to be soaring in popularity because of its star power. And Monday's matchups did not disappoint. ESPN says the LSU-Iowa game drew 12.3 million viewers, the biggest ever audience for women's basketball. Today's news has been reported by the Associated Press. This has been the World News for Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. Thanks again for joining us at the Dunkley Report.